Page 185 of The Unfolding is the story of Granger Smith.
I was completely crippled by these visions. PTSD, thoughts of the pool and the failure of CPR. It would wake me up in the middle of the night. They would pop into my head while I was on stage. I was losing my grip on everything as I tried harder and harder to fix myself.
God's story has been unfolding
since the beginning of time.
He invites you to be a part of it.
Another page in the unfolding.
Hi, it's Meredith. What would make someone walk away from a successful 24-year career in country music to follow a completely different path? For Granger Smith, it was a heartbreaking tragedy and a surprising discovery of peace he never thought possible. This conversation is honest and it's tough, but ultimately it is a story of hope. Granger talks about the loss of his young son, the grief that nearly crushed him, and the faith that carried him forward. There are some sensitive topics, child loss, suicide, so please take care as you listen, but I think you'll walk away encouraged. Here's my conversation with Granger Smith.
I was the oldest child of 3 boys. I grew up in a very faithful household. My mother and father were very faithful Christians, and we always went to church. We didn't just go on Christmas and Easter. We, as kids, went to the typical church camps and young life camps and FCA and all of those type of events. I was part of them. Got baptized when I was 13. At the time, we were in a Methodist church, Lake Highlands United Methodist Church in Dallas. After the confirmation class, got baptized and got my first Bible to myself and began my first memorization of certain verses that I loved, that I was encouraged by certain young life camps to follow. And so that's how things started for me. I could tell you in a pretty decent way an articulation of the gospel, what Jesus did on the cross, understood who Jesus was. In hindsight, everything right now I'm talking about is in hindsight. I believe I had a good grasp of who Jesus was for a teenage kid. Moving forward from that, I got really into music, loved music. And as long as I can remember, I was writing poetry. And so when I learned how to play the guitar at 14, I started singing along with that guitar. Not great, but badly singing along just because I loved it. And began quickly writing songs, just like poetry, this time to the music and singing along with it. And I just loved to do it.
What kind of songs were they? And do you remember one of the first songs you wrote?
They were country songs because I was inspired by George Strait. I was inspired by the Eagles. And I was singing in little Opry's in North Texas, singing a couple songs on a Saturday night.
As a teenager?
As a teenager. I was playing high school football, and then on Saturday mornings after the Friday night game, I would go and to this Opry, and we would rehearse and then play on Saturday night, play a couple songs. And so it was always country music. The first song I ever sang that I wrote was called On Earth as It Is in Texas.
That's a great title.
Yeah, it ended up being on my very first album that I put out when I was 19.
That's impressive. What a great experience, though, for a teenager to have that, just to go through that experience of being able to rehearse with people and perform even at that young age. So you obviously had talent. Was that what you wanted to do then? Did you think this is what I'm going to do and what I'm going to be?
Early on, I did. And I don't know. I don't think talent really had anything to do with it at that time. I just loved it. I loved it so much that could outweigh talent in the aspect that I was just so passionate about it. I would just practice all the time. That led to me seeking out George Strait concerts, and I would go to watch George Strait play. And I was in his fan club, and that really cultivated the love for the tour life. I just wanted to be part of it. I thought, what a great circus to be a part of. Whether I'm a bus driver or the lighting guy or one of the band members, I just want to be a part of this. This just seems so fun. And so that began a journey for me chasing that early on as a teenager.
So did you get a chance to do that? To be a part of the touring life, a bus driver or a lighting guy or that kind of thing? Or did you think you wanted to be the one on stage?
That's a great question. I did, actually. I moved to Nashville when I was 20, and I moved because of a songwriting contract that I signed.
That's huge.
went to write songs for a company called EMI in Nashville, and just a young kid, in this new city from Texas. And I started playing steel guitar. And at that point, I started playing. I loved steel guitar, pedal steel guitar. I would just sit in this little apartment in Nashville. I didn't have any friends really. So I would either write songs or practice playing steel guitar. That gave me an opportunity. It opened some doors to then go be a band member and be not the front guy, but the back guy, supporting guys. I did that for a few years, just supporting guys in different clubs and venues, playing as the band member, as the crew guy.
So what was going on during those years? Now you're your later teen, early 20s. What was the trajectory of your faith and your relationship with God? Did it just remain consistent? Did it grow? Back burner?
Sometime between Texas A&M and undergrad and probably moving to Nashville, it became more and more nominal. Going to church quickly became less and less a priority as I toured more and more and was playing until sometimes I'd get home at 3 a.m. on a Saturday night or Sunday morning. And so going to church became out of the question. I just couldn't sustain it. I couldn't get any sleep. And waking up on a Sunday and getting dressed and going to church wasn't something that I looked forward to or even wanted to do. As I removed myself from that, Christianity itself became very much cultural and very much nominal. It's important to say through that I would have told you absolutely, without a doubt, I was saved, believed the gospel, trusted in Jesus, defended the faith to some extent, and still had those memorized Bible verses as a kid.
So did there come a time when you felt like you missed that? Or did that seem like life like this is pretty good and I'll just keep going because I'm chasing my dream and I've got my passion?
Yeah, it didn't really occur to me in that way. Once again, we're still talking in hindsight. And so I don't think I ever sat down and thought, how can I reconcile this religion thing? That never crossed my mind. I was a Christian and I was saved by grace. So it wasn't going to church or the desire to seek godly things, righteous things. That was completely irrelevant. And so it didn't occur to me to reconcile this. Now, in hindsight, I was dead in my trespasses. I was dead. And so that's the danger. Therein lies the danger of cultural Christianity, of nominal Christianity. It's going to highlight a danger of giving our kids too early of an assurance of the faith without seeing any fruit of it, and continuing to encourage people when they show no fruit, no desire to go to church, no desire to seek God in any way, no desire to get into the Word. When we continue to reassure people in the faith in that way, it's very, very dangerous.
Wow.
To answer your question, I didn't even consider that there was anything wrong.
Wow. And, sometimes when we're chasing something that lines up so well with our gifts, our talents, and our passions, we can become so consumed by that, and it brings us joy. So it can be kind of a barrier between getting in touch with the fact that we actually need God because we don't feel like we need Him. So you begin touring, you're doing these things that you dream. How long did that season in Nashville and just that, growing in your passion, and what kind of happened along that journey?
So the time in Nashville was 4 years until I decided to move back to Texas and start a band. There wasn't an opportunity for original music in Nashville. It was only playing cover songs on Broadway, which is what I was doing. And so the publishing company that I was with agreed to continue the publishing deal if I would go back and start a band and play these songs and actually start releasing music. So that's what I did. This was in the year 2004, 4.5, somewhere around there. And so moved back that summer and immediately started a band and immediately started playing. I was in College Station, Texas at the time. I was also finishing undergrad and got a pickup truck and got a band, and we were off. We were playing music and not doing it very successfully. I mean, no one was coming to the shows at that time, but I loved it. And I loved the challenge of that. And I loved the challenge of trying to grow the brand. There were times, I would say, looking back, that there were times when I read the Bible more than others. I remember during tough times, I could rely on Psalm 23 and just kind of say it, kind of meditate over those words, and they felt good. But there was no other fruit from that. I would pray I think a lot of times I'd pray as I got in bed, thank you, God, for the day. And then I would pray a lot of times before a meal. That was it. There wasn't church involved. The Bible, other than I need it because I'm struggling with something. I need Psalm 23. There was nothing else. Nothing else. Wow. But I was still a Christian, I said.
I just like to kind of gauge, like during that season where I don't know if happy is always the right word to say, but were you happy?
Yeah. I was. Everything was, like work was tough. I mean, we were grinding, and I have always kind of liked the grind. So that didn't bother me. Mm-hmm. I never got down. There were times when I thought this might be it. Like, I don't think we have any more money to fund anything else without some kind of breakthrough, without some kind of big thing happening. And I could never have seen the big things that did happen before they came. They just did. But I was happy. Mm-hmm. And I loved doing what I was doing.
So what finally happened? So there were some big things that finally happened.
There were several things. The first one that I could remember was I wrote a song for the university called We Bleed Maroon. And it was right at the end of a season of, I put out an album and no one bought it. And I thought it was good, but no one listened to it. And it took a lot of money just to produce that album and put it out. And then it fell flat. And then through a long set of circumstances, I wrote this song called We Bleed Maroon for the university, who I thought at that time was rejecting the song because I never heard anything back from them or anybody. And then I heard it on the radio one day. Random.
You're kidding. No way. Out of the blue?
Yeah, out of the blue. And so I thought, well, that's something. Somebody at the radio station had found it and decided this is really cool. And then it took off and it went viral in 2006, as much as you could have something go viral in that year.
Yeah.
Without, it was before iTunes and all that kind of stuff. So I was actually physically mailing out singles of it in little albums. That all of a sudden it gave me a break to then fund the next project.
And so what did you do?
The next project was, I think I upgraded the pickup truck that could barely make it and got a Suburban. And then another album. That next album was called Don't Listen to the Radio. And the first single off that album was the title track called Don't Listen to the Radio. And the music video was my first music video, which I was able to fund then.
Wow. And
the girl that I cast for the video was my now wife.
Now, she wasn't your wife when you cast her for the video.
Correct. That's when I met her.
That's when you met her, which that makes for a really lovely story. Well, that's really cool. So now you're starting to see some success. Again, just sort of checking in, like relationship with God, any of that kind of stuff. Is it still on the back burner, just not part of what you felt like you needed?
No change. When Amber and I got married and we were really on the exact same page, it was like, hey, I remember early on there was some kind of conversation that sounded like this. Hey, I got to check in because as this relationship's getting more serious, I got to know, do you believe in God? Because I'm a Christian. And Amber was like, yes, I'm a Christian too. And I was like, great. We're both Christians. Good.
Box checked, right?
Box checked. Let's move on. And that's what it was. Mm-hmm. And she was on the same nominal path that I was. We were identical in that aspect. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got married in 2010, met in 2009. And in 2011, two things happened. We had London, our daughter, that October. And I put out this character on YouTube called Earl Dibbles Jr. It's an alter ego.
Can we talk about Earl, like where that came from?
We were trying to think of a way to promote the new album that was going to come out. And we were trying to come up with just some funny viral videos. And my brothers and I were doing a whole bunch of these. And he was one of them, this ultra country boy. It was a kind of a joke. Really, it was. And it went viral, it went very viral. That just sent us on a new trajectory. It launched that album that was going to come out in every way that we ever wanted it to. It sent us into a national tour. We started gaining popularity first started in the Midwest, and then it kind of sprouted out in the Northeast and the Northwest, and we were off to the races. A couple of years after that, I got a record deal, many ways because of that viral success. And then my first song on a national radio release went number one in the world.
Crazy.
That was in 2015.
Wow. So now you're finally living the dream, right? I mean, or at least in theory, living the dream.
Yeah.
Were you happy? Were you content?
Yeah, I was very happy. I had a pretty good grasp on reality. I had a pretty good grasp on not indulging in the material things and the success that was kind of pouring in. I've never really been And that's just the grace of God. That's not in me. That's by the grace of God. I've never really been the person to chase after the shiny things. I loved playing music. I loved seeing the reaction. I loved being able to manipulate emotions through a 3-minute song on the stage. I love that feeling. It's interesting because I have a journal it's a digital journal, so I'm able to look at it every day, look back on those years. Now, like this morning I did, every morning I put a new entry in, and then I look back on the past 7-8 years or whatever and check in with myself. And I began around that time really getting into self-help and self-improvement and ways to cultivate gratitude and gratefulness and ways to make my body as healthy as it could be and maximize my sleep and maximize what I was eating and counting my macros and calories. And I really got into that world. And as we're checking in with the God question, that really was becoming my God. In a lot of ways, self-help it very much is a religion. Although I didn't know, and certainly wouldn't have said that. In fact, the guys that lead the self-help religion don't even call it that, and a lot of them call themselves Christians. Part of my self-help routine was in the midst of waking up early and taking pride in getting up before the sun came up and getting things done in a systematic, organized way, in a egotistical way that the world was not doing. And I was getting ahead of them.
You're better.
Yes. And not only am I better, but through diligent hard work, I'm increasing the gap of betterness, and part of that morning routine was reflecting on my faith. So it was like meditation, 10 minutes of meditation through an app is what I was doing, 10 pages of nonfiction reading, some kind of self-improvement.
Oh my goodness.
A workout. And part of that was a gratitude journal and journaling. And part of that was reading at some kind of devotional, Christian devotional. You could pick your poison, whatever faith you are, you could pick it and just insert it here.
Insert that here.
And read a devotional, and it would have scripture on it and then a reflection on the scripture. That would take about 10 minutes. These are like 10-minute blocks that I would do all these things until the workout. Listen to a podcast, listen to an audiobook on the way to the gym, and that was my day.
Boy, you were maximizing everything, weren't you? I mean, everything that the world tells you need to do to be successful. You were hitting it like maximum force.
Yeah, and there's a reason I say it and tell you that story. There's a reason I go into that coming up, and it'll all make more sense. Mm-hmm. I'm not just saying that.
All right, so you're like cranking it on every level. Like, how were your personal relationships? Were as far as you could tell, things are golden everywhere in your life?
Yeah, this is the strangest testimony you've ever heard so far, probably, because so many times you hear a Christian testimony and it's like, man, things were just not good. I was sad. I had great success, and yet I was broken, or I was tormented by something, or I was shallow and hollow inside. And that wasn't the case. As we record, you and I are recording, it's January 10th, okay? So I looked at January 10th's entry this morning in 2019. And what I was doing was I was writing one letter per day of gratitude to somebody in my life that had impacted me in a positive way. I was writing it just saying, hey, I just want to tell you what you've meant to me in my life. And I appreciate you and I'm grateful for you. And I would mail it. So that was cultivating the relationships. To your point, how were my relationships? Mm-hmm. Good. They were good. And this is who I was on June 4th, 2019. That's who I was. The career was good. Life was good. I had a great grip and a great control over everything that I had going. Amber and I had, by then, we'd moved into a house we'd been in for 5 years then. We had partially restored it. It was a little farmhouse on 10 acres in the Texas Hill Country. The land, when we first bought it, was kind of dilapidated, and we had just brought it back to life, and it was great. It was just a wonderful place to raise a family, and that's who I was on June 4th. As we were getting the kids ready for bed, Amber was taking a shower and getting ready to get the bedtime routine going. The kids were bathed, and I was packed for a tour that I was heading out on the next day, that the kids were going to join me on the next week, which was summertime. We were going to fairs. We were going to those Illinois county fairs and riding the Ferris wheel and eating cotton candy. And I remember it was about 7:30, and London said, she's my daughter, she was 7, and she said, Daddy, could we go outside? I made a gymnastics routine I want to show you. And this is what she did, back then. And so she still does. So I said, yes. So we went outside, and the two boys, Lincoln and River, followed us outside. So we go out to the green grass. We're all barefoot. They have their pajamas on, and the boys immediately pick up these water guns, and they're filling up their water guns and shooting each other and running around laughing. And I was holding London's ankles as she's doing a handstand. Watch me, Daddy, watch me, Daddy, watch me, Daddy. No, I'm going to do this. And I remember looking up and seeing the blue sky as the sun was going down at 7:30, and the sky was changing colors, and the leaves are green, and the grass is vibrant. Early June is a beautiful time in Texas. It's before it gets too hot. And I remember right then, soak up this moment, because moments like this will not last forever. As part of my daily gratitude understanding, I had a pretty good grasp on the present moment. Living in the present moment was a big deal for me, because as a musician, I could easily look ahead to the next tour, the next album, the next single, and miss what's happening right in front of me. And that's what I was trying to capture. And what I thought was, because all these kids, they're going to grow up, they're going to move out, they're going to be gone. It's just going to be Amber and I in the house together. And I will miss these days, the boys playing water gun fight and London with their gymnastics. I'll miss this. That's exactly what I was thinking in that exact moment. The next thought was, it's quiet. Where's River? He's my 3-year-old. That's not uncommon to say for anyone that's ever had a 3-year-old. It's not uncommon to say, where is he? It's been quiet for 30 seconds. Where is he? What cabinet is he climbing on, or whatever it might be? And so I said, where's River? And I looked over my shoulder, my left shoulder, inside our fenced gated pool. He was in the middle of the pool, floating face down. I couldn't understand that thought. I couldn't compute that thought. Nothing about it made sense. And I started running towards it and slammed through the gate with my hand and crashed into the water and picked him up. And I thought, the time was so short since I saw him last, I thought that he would be choking and coughing and spitting water and crying. And I'd say, buddy, what are you doing? How'd you get in here? You're not supposed to be in here. But that's not what happened. Instead, he was lifeless, cold, purple. His eyes were open. There was no life to him. It was like a rag doll. Once again, this is just reflections of those moments, because I couldn't understand in the moment what was actually happening, and tried CPR, but I didn't really know how to do it, just what I'd seen in movies. I didn't have my phone on me, so London, my daughter, runs inside to tell Amber to get my phone, and Amber comes out, and she doesn't have my phone. I tell her to go back, and she's panicking. She goes to get it. I'm still trying CPR. He's not responding. We got emergency services on the phone, and they walked me through CPR. But it took him about 10 minutes to get there, because we lived in the country. And that was too long for his little brain without oxygen. They were able to revive his heartbeat with their electric shock. We followed him to the hospital, but the sickness was too much. His brain had gone too long. And within 24 hours, they had to tell us there was no more hope. We would lose him that day.
Can you remember anything in that 24 hours about what you felt? Or I know sometimes it's such a blur and it can be just numb, but do you remember any thoughts toward God in those moments?
I do remember. The beginning of it was at the pool. It was, please God, don't take this child. Please God, revive him. Please God, where are you? Where are you? Don't let him die. Let me do what I can do to bring him back. That's how it started. Those are the first mentions of God. It was right away. And then it was the same thing in the car on the way to the hospital. As we followed the ambulance, it was, God, please save this child. And through the events through the hospital, when the doctors told us he would not make it, they then told us the next decision for us to make would be, when can they unplug the breathing machine? So Amber and I walked out to a little serenity garden to discuss this, numb to the whole situation. Just the day before, we were playing in the green grass with this boy. Perfect. And he looked perfect still on the table. All his color had returned as he was, hooked up to these machines. we were talking about a lot of things in that conversation, but as we're thinking about when to tell them to turn the machine off, I got a text message from my cousin. And word by then had gotten out to the immediate family. There's no more hope for River. Granger and Amber need to tell them the doctors when to turn off the machine. I get a text from my cousin, and he says this, paraphrasing, he says, in all caps, "Do not unplug that machine. Give this to God. He will perform a miracle, but only if you give it fully to him. He needs all the doctors to back away so that there is no doubt left that it is God that will revive this child." All caps. I immediately thought, that's wrong. This is wrong. And that's the maximum theology in my cultural Christian brain was screaming at me, something's not right. Now my cousin, totally sincere in the text, totally wanting what's best. Absolutely nothing on him. But it was an interesting highlight that there was a strange theology creeping into that hospital that my spirit was rejecting. And it was taking away total sovereignty from God. As if we do this, God does this. We take doctors away, then God acts. He waits to get glory so that it looks good on him. It's like, hang on a second. That doesn't make any sense. That was the first time feelings changed about God in that hospital. The prayer then, instead of, "God, please heal this boy, please heal this boy," it suddenly became, "God, you know our hearts. You know we want healing. We desperately want a miracle. But if you don't give it to us, give me the strength to know what to do in this moment for my family. If it is your will that you take this child, give me strength to move forward in this moment without him." That was a new deal. That was a new prayer, a new idea that was the beginning of a journey for me. It was a beginning of a providential journey for me. That switch, that certainly came from something deeper than my own mind.
So in the days then ahead, you did obviously have to make that decision.
Yes. Amber actually threw a curveball into the whole situation, and we walked back in to tell him to turn off the machines. Amber actually said, "We want to donate his organs," to something we hadn't even talked about. But that extended our hospital stay another 24 hours as they found the recipients for his organs. And then something very interesting happened in that. Here's the next bit of sovereignty that was really heavy on me. This was the worst day of my life. It might not always be, I don't know, but it was at the time, certainly, and it still is as I look back on it. Everything was horrible about that day and the events leading up to it, except one thing. Now, because of the organ donation, there is a sliver of good amidst all the bad. It wasn't all dark. There was a small, tiny ray of light, ever so small, that had come into this horrible situation. And so as I didn't know what was happening to me then with that bit of revelation, I do now. What was happening to me was I was beginning to understand that through God's sovereignty, He is still good. Even when we can't see it, we can't understand it. He is working good in it, not as a response to it, but something He already has planned in His will for it. And so because of that, I could reflect on that day and go, it was almost all bad, but it wasn't all bad. There was good, because for another family or two or three, it was the best day. They received a miracle that day as they got a phone call from those doctors saying, "We found an organ match for your child or for your spouse. We found it. They're going to live now." It's a miracle for them. How long had they been praying for that? And you're telling me God sovereignly works that into this plan on our worst day? Interesting things were happening for me in those moments.
It was just the beginning of changing Granger's mind, but his heart, that's what really needed to change. And Granger was still sure that he was going to be able to fix it all, including fixing himself.
So I forgot most of that, what I just said, as I went back home and started digging into self-help and trying to fix myself. Of course, using God as my source of faith, and would acknowledge it at that, but that was head knowledge. But my heart wasn't there, because my heart was relying on, I must get up early. I must read these books. I must meditate longer. I must work out. I must get a good night's sleep, even though none of those things were really happening well. I was losing everything. I was losing my grip on everything slowly as I tried harder and harder to fix myself. I don't want anyone to hear this and misunderstand what I'm saying and how dangerous the cultural Christianity was, because I didn't look at it as fixing myself. I was a Christian. I believed in Jesus. He was my Lord and Savior, but I wasn't acting like that. I was acting like I was my Savior. I see that now. So I went to therapy with Amber. I was completely crippled by PTSD and thoughts of the pool and River's purple face and his rag doll arms and the failure of CPR, the doctors coming in saying there's no hope. I was crippled by these visions that plagued me like a disease. It would wake me up in the middle of the night. They would pop into my head while I was on stage singing. They would pop into a conversation with someone else. I would just see River in the pool all of a sudden. And my brain was looping, trying to find the missing piece to something that just it couldn't compute. It's like if my brain was a computer, I had the spinning wheel going. It would think how to solve the problem for me, and it would crash and spin. And that crash resulted in a severe PTSD and depression for me.
How long did that season of looping and that go on for you?
It climaxed in the sixth month, because in December, after therapy, after a lot of things that I tried to set up for myself to fix myself, which I now call wooden weapons, because they were weapons that I had, and it was like they were made of wood because they were worthless in the war I was fighting. I highly underestimated the war, the battle that I was in. This is when that came to a culmination. It was in Boise, Idaho, and I was on tour, the last tour of the year. Things were going great. The shows were great. They were sold out. I was getting a lot of support from people. I was on my 6th month of grief. And anyone that's gone through grief knows that there's ups and downs. It's like a wave. You travel up and down. Mm-hmm. You have good days. You have bad days. You have good minutes and bad minutes or hours. And I was starting to put together a string of better days. And the self-help and all the things I had tried were starting to get better. I still had bad days. I still had the haunting PTSD, but I was learning through therapy ways to kind of manage it. And on this day, Boise, Idaho, we had a great sold-out show. We overcame some adversity. I finished the show, and some of the guys said in my band, in the most sincere way, they said, "Man, it feels good to see you normal again." And I said, "Yes, it does. It feels good." And they said, "There's a little bar across from the bus. What do you say we go and just have a few drinks, talk about old times?" I said, "I would love to do that. I would love to feel normal with my guys." I hadn't had any alcohol since we lost Riv. I just didn't want to. I didn't care to be social in any way. So, and I was never a heavy drinker before that anyway, but that wasn't spiritual. That was because that's not good for your body, you know? So I go to this bar, we have a few drinks, talked about old times, we laughed, we reflected on the years in the van and no one going to the shows and how things slowly started to get better in those early tours in 2013 when we had Earl Dibbles Jr. As I got up to go back to the bus, said goodnight to everyone, I realized I'd had a few too many and I was stumbling to the bus. And I got to the bus and I'd kind of fumbled with the keypad, the lock code. I couldn't remember it, even though I'd entered it 1,000 times, and I finally got it and I was frustrated, and I got on the bus and I was like, wow, I've had too many. I said, in fact, this was the first time I've had anything really to drink in like 6 months. And then all of a sudden I remembered, oh, been a little bit. It's been 6 months. And then I went into my little bedroom in the back of the bus and I saw all my little things, my little wooden weapons, my therapy journal, my self-help books, all my little items that I had stacked up to try to defeat the enemy, myself. And I realized in that moment, although I might have felt normal that day, I was not normal. I was still very, very sick. I suddenly realized, oh no, maybe with this alcohol, this inebriation, I won't be able to fight off the visions. And then I remembered the visions and they came back. Vivid. River's in the pool. He's face down. I'm crashing in to get him. I turn him over. His face is purple. His eyes are rolling back in his head. His limbs are loose like a rag doll. I try CPR. I don't know how to do it. I see Amber's face as she runs up to the pool. I see London run out to flag down the emergency services to tell them where to park in the front yard. They run in with their equipment. They pull me aside. They put the electric shock on him. I see the doctors coming in, telling him there's no hope. I go back to the funeral. I see Lincoln, his brother's hand on the little coffin as he says goodbye to his brother. And it's too much. I'm losing my mind. I had a panic attack. I was completely insane, bawling, crying, and I knew there's one way I could fix this right now. And I reached into the drawer and pulled out a pistol. I sat there in that bus, tears streaming down my face, crying all by myself. About midnight, I heard a voice, but it wasn't audible. It was like I thought a thought that was not my own thought. It was manifested by a consciousness that was not my own. And the thought said this to me: this is the way. This is the way to peace. This is the way to rest. Squeeze the trigger. Everything will be fine. This is the way it ends. Suddenly, I realized I was being invaded. There was an intruder in the room, in my head, an enemy that I had far miscalculated, that I had no weapons to defend myself, and yet I was surrounded, outnumbered, outgunned, outsmarted, and it was about to kill me. All of that became a reality in that moment, that everything I'd worked for in therapy and thought and all the PTSD, all of it was an attack on me, and I had nothing. I had a worthless cultural Christianity that was going to do nothing in this moment against this enemy. And in that moment, I cried out, Jesus, save me, please. The vision stopped. I dropped the gun. I fell to my knees, lay down on the floor in all my clothes, fell asleep on the floor crying to Jesus that night. After that, everything started changing quickly. The next morning, I woke up with a new mission. I wasn't a new person. I wasn't reborn or anything like that, but I had a new mission. Why did calling out to Jesus stop this? Who is he really? Because he can't be the one that I've just talked about nominally for so many years of my life. The one I know, he died on the cross. It's God's Son sent, the incarnate Son of God. It has to be more than that, or at least I'm misunderstanding all of it. So I started a mission. And I wasn't really talking about this to other people because I kind of thought I might have been a little bit crazy. In fact, I didn't even bring up that night in Boise for years after it happened, until I started to write the book. And then I had to tell my wife. She was the first one to know. But that mission lasted 3 months. I was listening to sermons on YouTube. Started with Billy Graham because I thought the first thing I should do is find a preacher. And the first place I knew to look was YouTube. And the first name I thought of was Billy Graham. So I started listening to Billy Graham over and over, compulsively. I knew how to be compulsive. I'd been in the self-help business for so long. I knew how to do this. I knew how to completely run down these rabbit holes until I found a solution. So listen to Billy. These things are just pouring over me. And I was driving around in my truck listening to these all the time. Even I would brush my teeth and listen to them. I would take a shower and listen to them. But I wasn't there yet. 3 months of this, and different preachers started popping into my algorithm as I was listening on YouTube. So there would be another one to pop up, and I go, that sounds interesting. I'll listen to this guy, And I was just listening, and it was doing something to me. I just didn't quite know what. And once again, I'm still the nominal Christian. I'm still the cultural Christian. But this kind of stuff, listening to this preaching kind of feels good. That's all it was. Until one day. And this was March 1st, 2020. So 3 months after that dark night in Boise. I was listening to a pastor on YouTube. I'm driving my truck, and the pastor is teaching out of the book of John, chapter 14. And he says, as he's reading down, and he gets to about the 21st, 22nd verse, and the disciple asked Jesus, Lord, why is it that you manifest yourself to us, but not to the rest of the world? Jesus answered him, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him. And suddenly, through those words, through the pastor reading Jesus, I knew all in that moment, I was loved, I was redeemed, I was restored, I was healed on that night in the bus at night in Boise. I knew I was loved. I knew I was an adopted son of God Almighty. And yet, the missing part for me, what wasn't computing for me was, Jesus said, if anyone loves me, you'll know that kind of person. The kind of person that loves me, you'll know them because those are also the people that keep my word. Those aren't the people that earn my love by keeping my word, but you just know them because out of gratitude from being loved by me, they can't help it. They're going to keep my word. I knew all of that instantly in that moment. Wow. And I thought, what is it? What's his word? I don't know any of it. There's bits of Psalm 23 I know. Maybe I know Romans 5:8 and John 3:16, but I don't know anything else. So I made a U-turn on that road. And I went home and I told Amber, I said, we're reading the Bible. No more devotionals. No more spiritual, devotional things. We're going straight to the word. She was like, where do we start? And I said, I don't know. How about Matthew? Matthew 1, Jesus' birth. It seems like a good place to start to me. And she said, let's do it. I go to that Bible, knock the dust off of it, literally, figuratively, and start right there in Matthew 1 and started reading like my life depended on it. And it did. And it started transforming me. And after I finished Matthew, I wanted to keep on going. Let's go to Mark. Let's hear it again. What does Mark have to say about this? Okay, now let's go to Luke, the doctor. What does he have to say? And then by the time I got through the Gospels, I wanted to read what's happened to the apostles. Let's go to the book of Acts. Let's see what they're doing. Oh my goodness, look at the transformation of these guys. Okay, now we're finished with Acts. Let's go to Romans. Let's get to hear straight from Paul the crazy story we heard from him in Acts. And now we're going to see from his mouth, what is he saying about this situation? I couldn't stop. And it was changing me. And then I understood who I was. I understood that now I am a sinner. Not only have I sinned against myself and caused myself this affliction and caused myself this pain and hurt, but I have sinned against God himself. I, with my sins, have created a separation between me and my God. My sins have hidden his face from me so that he does not hear. Isaiah says that. And that was me. I suddenly knew I'm a sinner and I need Jesus to reconcile, not just to make me feel good about my loss of River, but I need Jesus to reconcile me with God. That's what he promised. He's going to come and reconcile sinners to God through his death on the cross. And all of this became a reality to me. And then all of a sudden, the shame and the guilt of me at the pool, being a failure as a father, when the world says, forgive yourself. It's okay. You're not guilty. Jesus says, you are guilty, but I have come for the guilty so that I could make you clean. You stop trying to clean yourself up and you look to me, the only perfect one. I make you clean. I forgive you. I remove your guilt. And I became a child of God, reborn of the Spirit on March 1st, 2020.
Granger, what a radical transformation you've been through. From that moment, what happened?
Well, so that has not stopped. What I described is still what is happening to me and still what I go through. And what happened was that what made a difference from the nominal Christianity is suddenly I wanted to be around God's people. Suddenly I wanted to go to church. I wanted to read God's word. I wanted to have lunch with different pastors. Hey, my name's Granger. You're a local pastor. I'd love to have lunch with you. Just talk about some things that have been going on with me. And these guys were like, great. A pastor lives for that kind of phone call. Let's go to lunch. And I would just sit down and I go, tell me about this. Tell me about this. What happened here? I got all this zeal and they're trying to answer. And then the next day I'd book another lunch with another guy somewhere in Austin. And I just couldn't get enough. I loved it and I just craved it. And it was filling me and fulfilling me in every way. And then slowly the passion for music and singing started to fade. And as I started realizing, you know what? Jesus says, if anyone wants to come after me, he needs to deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. And I started thinking, singing country music and promoting a new single doesn't really feel like denying myself at all. And I don't really want to. I don't think my desire is there. I think my passion's going away. I'd rather tell people about Jesus. I'd rather tell people about the one that saved me in the bus in Boise, Idaho, and tell them so that they can get to him quicker than it took me. And that became a new passion for me. A few years went by, and I ended up completely hanging up country music and leaving with a final tour.
So you hung that up. What do you feel like? What's ahead?
I am in a season of equipping for sure right now. I'm trying to make up for all those years of not sitting in church on Sunday morning. And instead now I'm modeling to my kids, this is what we do. This is what we do on Sunday morning. Not because we're trying to please God in some way, but because this is what we love to do. We love to worship our Lord. And so we're going to go here and I'm going to sit under that wise teaching of my church. I'm in seminary right now, just starting my second year, getting an MDiv at Southern in Louisville. So that's all online now, which is just fantastic. Also getting out and preaching, trying not to do it too much, because although I do love it, I'm trying to be poured into more than I'm pouring out. I love talking about Jesus. My heart just swells when I get to tell my story or tell someone else about him or open the word and just walk through an exposition of some place in the word and how transformative it is to our lives. And that's where I am right now. I don't know what that looks like in 10 years, but I certainly have learned over the last 5 that my future is none of my business. And I'm perfectly okay with that.
I know that there are people who are listening who may recognize in themselves what they heard you talking about, that they don't have a relationship with the creator of the universe. If you had 2 minutes sitting over coffee with somebody in that position, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is you have to set aside time for you in the Word. You have to. And if it seems too overwhelming, then aim low and start with, and I'm going to read one chapter. If that seems like too much, then I'm going to read 1 or 2 paragraphs. And I'm going to start in the book of John or Matthew. I would say get up before your family does. And if that's where it works for me. Maybe someone else, you could find a better time. But for me, I like to get up when the house hasn't woken up yet. And I work through a Bible reading plan. I'm just saying set aside time in the Word because it is your lifeline. When we pray, we are speaking to God. When He speaks back, He speaks through His ever-living, breathing Word, the Bible. And so we need to set aside time for that. And then seek wise counsel around you, other people in the faith. Don't try to make a decision on your own. Am I that nominal Christian Granger's talking about? Don't try to sit there and make that decision yourself. Get around some other people and go, hey, keep me accountable. I heard this podcast and I heard Granger Smith, this guy's talking about nominal Christianity, and it kind of got me a little bit worried. And I just want to get around you guys and maybe we could dive into the Word. Let me tell you about what I'm reading this morning and let's keep each other accountable. And you might find, Granger, I hear you say that. I absolutely want no part of that. I am too busy. Then I would say, then you might be a nominal Christian.
If you would like to read more of Granger's story, he's written a book called Like a River, Finding the Faith and Strength to Move Forward After Loss and Heartache. You can learn more about that on his website. That's where you can find links to the Granger Smith Podcast, some of his sermons and music. You can also follow along with his family on their YouTube series called The Smiths, and links to his social media as well. All of that is at grangersmith.com. I'll link to that in the show notes. We are so grateful to Granger for sharing his story. Hey, Granger's wife, Amber, is getting ready to tell her story. She's written a book called The Girl on the Bathroom Floor, sharing her story of how she found hope and joy in the midst of suffering after the loss of their son. It's a book that can help you discover where God is in a world of hurt. It's called The Girl on the Bathroom Floor. It's coming out this October. Hey, thanks so much for listening today, and thank you for sharing episodes with friends to let them know about these powerful God stories too. Thanks to the team that helps make every episode of The Unfolding possible. Michael Shermack, our producer and network director, Jason Rackow. The Unfolding is a production of Faith Podcasts. You can find more great stories at myfaithpodcast.com. We'll be back next week with another page of The Unfolding.